I always knew this trip would change something. What I didn't expect was that it would be me. It was supposed to be a getaway, a break from the relentless buzz of city life, emails I never wanted to answer, and the vague ache of loneliness I pretended didn't exist. 5 days in the desert, under a canvas of stars, no Wi-Fi, no obligations. Just silence, sand, and Samir. Samir, the Sheikh's cousin technically, but titles meant little to him. He was warm where others were formal, always barefoot when he could be, effortlessly magnetic without trying to be the center of the room. I'd met him 2 years ago during a sustainability summit in Doha. I was there giving a talk about solar-powered infrastructure, sweating through my blazer, fumbling over Arabic words I barely knew. Samir had translated for me, badly on purpose I suspect, just to make me laugh. We kept in touch since then, sending memes, sharing Spotify playlists, calling sometimes after a rough day. Casual. Friendly. Safe. Until he invited me on this retreat. A small group, he'd said. Private camp. A camel trek and a few nights in the Qatari dunes to unplug. You need this, he told me. I'd said yes before I gave myself time to wonder why my chest tightened whenever he spoke to me like that. Now here we were, just the two of us it turned out. Everyone else had dropped out last minute. His cousins were stuck at a family event, and the German environmentalist couple missed their flight. Somehow the trip hadn't been cancelled. Somehow we'd decided to go anyway. The sun was slipping below the horizon as we arrived at the camp, the air cooling just enough to make me pull my hoodie tighter. Our tent was already pitched, white canvas with soft, golden lamplight flickering from inside. The guides exchanged a few words in Arabic with Samir, then left us with a tray of mint tea and more space than I was ready for. I busied myself unpacking unnecessarily, lining my books beside my sleeping mat, folding my clothes too neatly. Samir just watched me from across the tent, arms crossed, eyes soft. You always organize like you're about to live here, he said, his voice low and amused. It's a survival tactic, I muttered, not looking up. Control the chaos, even if it's just sock placement. He laughed, God, that laugh, and I felt something inside me unravel just a bit. I didn't know what I was doing here, not really. But I knew the moment he smiled at me like that, I wasn't here just for the stars or the sand. Something was going to shift between us. And I wasn't sure I was ready for it. Samir and I didn't become friends the usual way. It wasn't born out of proximity or mutual friends or any of the convenient, forgettable circumstances most adult friendships come from. No, it started with him pulling me aside after my presentation in Doha, grinning like a troublemaker and saying, "You know, you just told the entire room that your solar panels taste like chicken, right?" I'd never been more mortified in my life. And I'd never laughed harder. He had this way of disarming me. Always has. Samir treated the world like it was his living room, welcoming, informal, a little chaotic. And in contrast, I was me. Analytical, overly cautious, probably too sarcastic when I was nervous. Yet, with him, my walls started to crumble, one joke at a time. Over the past 2 years, our friendship had grown in flickers. Voice notes, long conversations after midnight, photos of weird architecture we knew the other would appreciate. I once sent him a blurry shot of a pigeon balancing on a solar panel. He sent back a voice note laughing for a full 30 seconds before saying, "Even nature approves of your energy dreams." Now here we were halfway into the desert night, sipping tea that tasted like sun-warmed mint and campfire smoke, the tent behind us glowing faintly. "I still don't get why you agreed to come," I said, looking out over the sand dunes, their edges glowing silver under the rising moon. "No offense, but you don't strike me as the silent reflection type." Samir leaned back on his elbows, his keffiyeh sliding slightly as he turned his head toward me. "Maybe I wanted to see what would happen when you were forced to stop overthinking." I raised a brow. "You mean like right now?" "Exactly," he said with a grin, then nudged me with his knee. "You're already doing better. Only checked your phone twice since sunset. It has no signal. Still counts." I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't stop the smile tugging at my lips. Was easy with him. Too easy. And that scared me more than I liked to admit. Later, when we unzipped the tent and ducked inside, I realized something that made my stomach sink. There was only one large sleeping mat. No dividers, no twin bags. Just one. I froze for a second, blinking at the setup. Huh. Samir followed my gaze and I saw it hit him too. He rubbed the back of his neck. The guides probably assumed we were closer. Right? I said quickly, too quickly. "Yeah, no big deal. It's just, yeah." His eyes flicked to me, then to the mat, then back again. "I can sleep outside if that makes you uncomfortable." "No." My voice cracked. I cleared my throat. "I mean, you don't have to. It's fine. We're adults." It's just sleeping. He watched me for a beat, his smile soft and unreadable. Okay. Just sleeping. But as I turned to unzip my hoodie and pull out the blanket I'd packed, I could feel his eyes linger. Not in a way that felt invasive, just present. A heat that stayed on my skin long after he looked away. We lay down, a small but perceptible space between us. I faced the canvas wall, heart thudding, every muscle tense and hyper-aware of the man inches away. I can hear you overthinking, Samir whispered into the dark. Can't help it, I whispered back. He chuckled softly, his breath brushing against the back of my neck. Then maybe I should talk until you fall asleep. Good luck with that, I murmured, trying to sound casual. But I knew sleep wouldn't come easily tonight. Not when every inch between us felt charged with something unspoken. Something I wasn't ready to name, yet. The storm came out of nowhere. 1 minute, we were hiking along a ridge just past the camp, sand stretching out around us like a golden ocean, wind brushing gently against our cheeks, and the next, the sky darkened like someone had turned a dimmer switch on the sun. A gritty wind picked up, fast and loud, and Samir grabbed my wrist instinctively. Sandstorm, he said, scanning the horizon. We need cover. Now. He wasn't smiling anymore. We half-jogged, heads low, scarves pulled up over our mouths, his hand never leaving mine. The camp was too far, already swallowed by the rising dust. The sky was turning a violent shade of burnt umber, and the sting of the wind against my skin made my eyes water. There. Samir shouted, pointing to a low rock formation. Between its curved edges sat a hollowed-out space, half cave, half crevice. Not much but enough. We stumbled into the shelter just as the full force of the storm hit. Sand lashed at the rocks outside like angry bees. I collapsed against the cool stone wall, panting, heart racing. Samir followed, pulling off his scarf and shaking the sand from his hair. We were inches apart in the tight space, just enough room for two people to sit, shoulders brushing, knees tangled awkwardly. I tried not to think about how warm his body felt next to mine, how the sharp edge of adrenaline in my chest was slowly being replaced by something softer, more electric. Well, I said, voice muffled behind my scarf. This wasn't in the brochure. He let out a breathless laugh and nudged my knee with his. I told you desert trips are never boring. The wind howled outside, a deep and relentless roar that made the air inside vibrate. The storm was going to last a while. Samir shifted to sit more comfortably, and in doing so, his thigh pressed against mine. He didn't move away. Neither did I. We fell into silence, the kind that wasn't awkward but heavy with everything unspoken. I could feel his breath, shallow and close, his shoulder brushing mine with every shift. His warmth seeped into me, calming, steady, real. And my heart was losing its damn mind. I glanced at him out of the corner of my eye. He was staring at the entrance, his lips slightly parted, his fingers idly tracing the hem of his keffiyeh. There was a small scar near his jaw, one I'd never noticed before. How had I never noticed that? I forget how beautiful it is, he said suddenly, eyes still on the storm outside. What is? The desert. Even when it's tearing itself apart. He turned to look at me. Even now, with the wind screaming and the sand blinding, it's honest. You can't fake anything out here. I swallowed hard. That sounds like something someone says right before getting philosophical. Samir smiled, soft and a little sad. Maybe I am. Something shifted then. Maybe it was the way he looked at me, like he was searching for something he wasn't sure he had permission to find. Or maybe it was just me finally cracking under the weight of what I'd been holding in. I wanted to reach for his hand. I wanted to lean in and feel what it would be like to kiss him. I wanted things I'd buried so deep under layers of friendship and fear and plausible deniability. But what if I ruined everything? What if I reached and he pulled away? I turned my gaze to the storm again, heart pounding. You ever wonder, I said quietly, what would happen if we stopped pretending we didn't feel things? Samir was still. I felt him go completely still. Then he said carefully, what kind of things? I almost laughed, bitter and breathless. You know what kind. He was quiet for a long moment. The wind filled the silence between us, sweeping through the cracks of our tiny shelter like a living thing. Then he shifted again, closer this time. His hand brushed against mine, lingering. Not an accident. You think I don't feel it? He said, barely above a whisper. Every time you smile like you're trying not to. Every time you look away too quickly. Every time I say something I don't mean just to see if you'll call me on it. My throat tightened. I couldn't breathe. I didn't know, I murmured, even though part of me had always known. I thought maybe, he trailed off, glancing down at our hands. Maybe it was just me. Maybe it was safer not to say anything. The storm raged on, but all I could hear was the rush of blood in my ears. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to lose this, I said, forcing the words past the knot in my chest. You're too important. If it got weird, if it didn't work, I don't think I could go back to how it was. Samir nodded slowly. I get it. I do. But his fingers found mine again, this time curling around them with quiet certainty. His skin was warm and rough against mine. I didn't move. I couldn't. We're already different, he said, looking straight at me now. Whether we name it or not. The only question is if we're brave enough to let it change us. I stared at him, heart thudding, lips parted, terrified and alive all at once. And then the wind outside began to soften, just slightly, like the desert was holding its breath, waiting for what we'd do next. The storm passed like a dream you barely remember when you wake. One moment it howled around us, all force and fury, and then, just quiet. Heavy silence, like the desert was catching its breath. We stayed inside the rock shelter for a while longer, neither of us eager to move. The sun had dipped low enough that the sky outside was bruised with deep purples and soft rust. I could see the soft swirl of dust still hanging in the air, illuminated in streaks of fading gold. But none of that felt as loud as the quiet between us. Samir was still holding my hand. Not tightly. Not like he was making a statement. Just there. Fingers gently tangled with mine, skin warm and patient, like he was giving me time to catch up with something he'd already decided. And I hated how afraid I was to speak. I wanted to say everything all at once, how long I'd been holding this inside, how many nights I'd replayed our conversations wondering if I'd imagined the way he looked at me. How I told myself that risking this friendship wasn't worth it, even when my heart whispered that it might be everything. But all that came out was, Samir? He looked at me and there was something in his eyes that stopped me cold. Vulnerability, sure. But also that quiet kind of bravery I'd only ever seen in him, like he was scared too, but he was still willing to jump if I said the word. I've been trying to pretend it's nothing, I admitted, my voice so small I barely recognized it. That what I feel when I'm with you is just friendship. But it's not. He didn't move. Just watched me, his expression unreadable. I don't just laugh differently with you, Samir. I am different with you. You make me feel like I'm more than just a brain on legs. You see me. And not in a flattering, you're nice to have around kind of way. In a way that scares the hell out of me. I felt my throat tighten. I looked away. And I've been so scared to lose what we have, I continued, fumbling through the confession like I was trying to unlock something with shaking hands. Because if this goes wrong, I don't think I could handle going back to being just your friend. But it's driving me insane not saying anything. The air felt thick between us. I realized I'd stopped breathing. And then, quietly, gently, he said, I was scared too. I looked up, heart lurching. I've been in love with you for a while, he said, voice cracking ever so slightly. And I kept convincing myself that you'd never see me that way. That if I told you, you'd get that polite look you get when people get too close. That you'd pull away. I blinked. You what? He gave a soft laugh. I know. The Sheikh's cousin, falling in love with the quiet, anxious American with solar panels in his suitcase. Hey, I said, trying to smile through the sting in my eyes. That's a very charming stereotype. He tilted his head toward me, serious again. I meant it, you know. About the desert being honest. It doesn't let you hide. And maybe that's a good thing. For a moment we just sat there, breathing the same air, hands still clasped, both of us too stunned and too aware of how fragile this all was. How hard it had been to say these things and how much it meant that we had. Say it again, I whispered. What? What you just said. He leaned closer, eyes never leaving mine. I'm in love with you. It wasn't just a statement. It was a surrender. My hand squeezed his. And that's when I leaned in. It wasn't perfect. Our noses bumped slightly and I was trembling more than I wanted to admit, but none of that mattered. Because the moment our lips met, soft, hesitant, but electric, I felt something in me settle. Like I'd been holding my breath for years and finally exhaled. He kissed me back with such tenderness it nearly broke me. His hand came up to cup my cheek, thumb grazing the edge of my jaw, and I leaned into him like I'd been waiting for this my whole life. When we finally pulled back, my forehead rested against his, eyes closed, overwhelmed but alive. That, he said softly, his breath brushing my lips, was definitely not just sleeping. I laughed, shaky and too full of everything. No, it wasn't. We sat in the quiet after that, the kind of quiet that didn't need to be filled. His thumb traced lazy circles on the back of my hand, and I realized I hadn't been this still in months, maybe years. Not the kind of stillness that meant boredom or numbness, but the kind that meant safety. Eventually I said, "So, what now?" Samir tilted his head, considering. "Well, we're probably going to be stuck here until one of the guides comes to find us. So I'd say we've got a bit of time to figure that out." "I meant with us." He smiled. "Oh, that." Then his expression softened. "I want to figure it out. With you. Whatever that looks like." "You're not scared." "I am," he said honestly. "But I've been scared and in love for a while now. At least now I get to stop pretending it's one or the other." I looked at him, and the part of me that always assumed love came with conditions, with tight rules and hidden traps, felt quiet. Because here he was, present, warm, honest. And he wasn't running. I squeezed his hand again. "I'm still scared." "I know," he said. "We can be scared together." He rested his head against mine, and I closed my eyes, letting the rhythm of our breaths become one. The storm outside was gone. The night was cooling, soft and fragrant with desert sage and wind-worn silence. But the shift inside me, that was louder than anything the sand could stir. I didn't know what tomorrow would look like, or what challenges we'd face once we stepped out of this moment and back into the real world. But I knew this: I loved him. And he loved me. And finally, that was something we could both say out loud. When the guide finally found us, face wrapped, eyes squinting from residual dust, Samir and I were curled up in the narrow rock shelter, limbs tangled, backs resting against the cool stone wall. He didn't say anything about the closeness. Just nodded, handed Samir a bottle of water, and said the storm had passed enough for a slow walk back. The air outside had turned crisp. The sand, still shifting in lazy spirals, looked like it had been sculpted by the sky. We walked close, our hands brushing occasionally, then holding when we thought the guide wasn't looking. Every small touch still sent sparks through me, but now they weren't laced with fear. We returned to camp just as the sky turned ink blue and stars began to stud the horizon. Samir tossed his scarf on a chair and turned to me with a look I couldn't quite name, half relief, half wonder. "So," he said, dragging the word out, "we kissed." Observant. "And confessed feelings." "I'm pretty sure you confessed first." Samir grinned, stepping close, his fingers grazing mine again. "Competitive already, huh?" "Just saying if we're keeping score. Then I should probably get ahead again." And before I could come up with a comeback, he leaned in and kissed me. Slower this time, deeper. Not the hesitant, charged moment from earlier, but something new. Assured. Familiar. When we parted, I rested my forehead against his, smiling. "Okay. You're winning." He laughed. "Finally." We made dinner together over the fire, laughing over the burnt rice and improvising a stew out of lentils, dates, and some random herbs I couldn't identify. Samir tossed one at me and dared me to eat it. I did. It was terrible. He laughed until he wheezed. It was easy, which surprised me. I kept waiting for the awkwardness to slip in, for some shift in tone, some too serious conversation about what it all meant. But it didn't happen. What we had before, our rhythm, our banter, the way we read each other's silences, it was still there. Only now, when I looked at him too long, I didn't look away. And when he touched my hand, I didn't flinch like it meant more than it should. It did mean more. And that was okay now. After we'd eaten and the fire was down to glowing coals, we sat wrapped in one thick blanket, our legs stretched toward the dying embers. "I should warn you," I said, watching the flames dance in his eyes. "I'm terrible at relationships." Samir didn't blink. "I'm not looking for perfect. Just honest." I hesitated. "This might get complicated. I mean, you live here. I don't. And I don't exactly have a history of, taking chances like this." "I know," he said softly. "But I've never been more sure of something. We can figure it out. Long distance for now, visits, video calls, we already do that. Only now, you don't have to pretend you're just calling because of time zones or tech articles." "I did that once," I muttered, burying my face in the blanket. "Twice," he corrected, grinning. I looked at him, really looked. The kind of look you give someone when you let yourself believe they might actually stay. "You're serious about this?" "I am," he said. "I've been serious about you for a long time." Something inside me softened. Gave way. I reached out and took his hand, intertwining our fingers slowly, deliberately. "Okay. Let's figure it out." He leaned over, pressed a kiss to my temple, and whispered, "We already are." The desert stretched out around us, vast and unknowable. But here, under the stars, wrapped in warmth and something dangerously close to love, I didn't feel small. I felt grounded. Chosen. Home. And for the first time in a long time, The future didn't feel like a burden. It felt like something I wanted, with him. The next morning, I woke to golden light spilling across the canvas walls of the tent, warm and soft as a memory. For a second I forgot where I was, only that I was warm, calm and not alone. Then I felt him beside me. Samir was still asleep, his back to me, one hand curled near his chest, the blanket pulled halfway down his shoulder. His hair was a tousled mess and he looked younger like this. Vulnerable. Peaceful. I watched him breathe. It hit me then in the quiet, this wasn't a dream. I hadn't imagined the kiss, the confession, the softness in his voice when he said he wanted this. That weight I'd carried for so long, the secret longing, the what-ifs, it was gone. Replaced by something solid. Real. I reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair away from his forehead. My fingers lingered there for a second too long, and his eyes fluttered open. He turned toward me, still blinking sleep away, and smiled that slow, sleepy smile that made something inside me melt. "Hey," he murmured, voice rough with sleep. "Hey. You watching me like a creep?" "Little bit." He chuckled and stretched, arm reaching across the mat until his hand found mine. "That's fair. I've been watching you sleep for months. Through my phone screen mostly. Way less satisfying." I rolled my eyes but didn't let go of his hand. "We have to leave today. Unfortunately." We lay there in silence for a few minutes, hands tangled, our bodies warm beneath the covers, neither of us moving. Outside, the desert was coming back to life, the wind carrying scents of sagebrush and ash from last night's fire, the distant groan of a camel, the gentle creak of tent ropes stretching under morning sun. "You still want to do this?" I asked quiet. Samir turned toward me, his face serious now. "I do." "You're not worried it'll get messy?" "I'm counting on it getting messy," he said. "That's how I know it'll be worth it." I laughed, but the emotion caught in my throat. I hadn't expected that answer. I hadn't expected him. And I was so goddamn grateful. He sat up, rummaged through his backpack and pulled something out, a small leather-bound notebook. I recognized it. He always carried it. Said it was for sketches and quotes he didn't want to forget. He flipped it open, scribbled something quickly, then tore out the page. "Here," he said, handing it to me. I glanced down at the note. "No matter how far the sun sets from you, know I'm looking at it too. Call me when it rises again." Below it, his number. As if I didn't already have it saved under 3 different contact names. I looked up and he was watching me with that quiet, sure expression again. "A little dramatic, no?" I teased, carefully folding the note. "Shut up," he said, bumping my shoulder. "Let me have my romantic moment." I tucked the paper into my pocket, close to my heart. "You're impossible. You like that about me." He was right. After breakfast, we packed up camp in a lazy rhythm. Him whistling off-key, me pretending to be annoyed. Our hands kept finding each other. Our eyes met more often than necessary. Everything felt lighter. There were no declarations, no dramatic parting promises. Just warmth. Steady and sure. As the Jeep pulled up and the driver loaded our bags, Samir turned to me, face glowing with sunlight and something deeper. "Come back soon," he said. "Try and stop me." Then just before we got in, he reached out and took my hand, not in a grand gesture, not for show. Just because he could now. Just because it was ours. Our fingers laced together, and the heat of his palm against mine steadied something in me. It wasn't just one night. And it never had been. As the Jeep rumbled back toward civilization, away from sand and stars and confessions in the wind, I held his hand and didn't look back. Because everything I wanted was sitting beside me, grinning, humming to himself, and occasionally glancing over just to make sure I was still smiling too. And I was. Because this was the beginning. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of where we'd go next. I just knew I wanted to go there with him.